Our governments may fall, but our people remain the same. Our people remain committed to the same values, to the same morals, to the same moral laws, regardless of whether there's a government over them to enforce that. But that's not the case with you. Even though you're trying to impose your value system all around the world, when things become difficult in your own societies, you abandon your principles, you abandon your values. They're insufficient for preserving the security and the stability and the tranquility of your societies. They're insufficient. They're inadequate for that. So that alone, along with many, many other things, that alone shows me the inferiority of your value system, the inferiority of your belief system, and the superiority of Islam. And your belief system, your enlightenment values, are extremely selectively applied in your society throughout your history. They apply to some people and not others. It's like in George Orwell's Animal Farm. Some people are more equal than others in your society. Your value system is not evenly applied. I mean, there's obvious examples everyone knows about. But just look at democracy, for example. You want democracy all around the world, supposedly. You say that you want democracy all around the world, so-called. But you don't even apply democracy. Let's just, for the sake of argument, let's pretend that you have a democratic system in the United States, and it's an actually healthy, functioning democratic system, which is obviously not the case. But let's just, for the sake of argument, pretend that it is. You don't believe that democracy is important, for example, in the private sector. You don't believe that businesses, that companies, that corporations should be democratic. Your belief in the supremacy of democracy does not extend to the private sector. Corporations don't have to be democratic, do they? In fact, corporations are sacrosanct. It's sacrilegious to say that there should be any intervention in the private sector to make it actually accountable to the population, accountable to the public, accountable to the workers. And anyone who even talks about something like that, anyone who even suggests that companies and corporations should be democratic.
Wagwan kings and queens, welcome back to my YouTube commentary. Much love and respect to every melanated soul watching this video today. Now, something powerful I'm going to talk about today, okay? And the voices that once spoke with the arrogance of empire are now speaking with confession right now. Now, I'm going to react on a video of Shahid Bolsen, okay? Shahid Bolsen, a man born and educated within the Western system, says openly that the Western values has become inferior, okay? It marks a shift in global consciousness. It is not just a critic talking. It's a civilization questioning its own soul. Now, for centuries, Western nations sold the world a dream of moral superiority. You know, they told humanity that their way was the only way, that progress was white, that truth spoke English, and that civilization meant conversion. And today, their own thinkers, their own professors, their own minds, their own doctors and professors are beginning to see the cracks in that myth. Okay, Shahid Bolsen says Western value like a spiritual anchor. They float on individualism and profit, not on shared belief and collective purpose. So without that anchor, he wants that a society drifts into emptiness, a storm of confusion where freedom becomes chaos and wealth becomes worship. So that's what I'm gonna react on this today, a video of Shahid Bolsen, and we can see it clearly: depression, mass shootings, moral confusion, loneliness in crowded cities, technology advances, but the human spirit decays. So Bolsen's words echo through the crisis like a mirror held up to the West's own face. Now, he's saying this. He's saying what our ancestors, of black ancestors, already knew, that a civilization without spirit cannot sustain itself, okay? That's why today Africa rises again, not with armies, but with only the truth. Now, let's watch this clip first, and then I'll come back here and talk about this more.
The inferiority of your value system, the inferiority of your belief system, and the superiority of Islam. And your belief system, your enlightenment values, are extremely selectively applied in your society throughout your history. They apply to some people and not others. It's like in George Orwell's Animal Farm. Some people are more equal than others in your society. Your value system is not evenly applied. I mean, there's obvious examples everyone knows about. But just look at democracy, for example. You want democracy all around the world, supposedly. You say that you want democracy all around the world, so-called. But you don't even apply democracy. Let's just, for the sake of argument, let's pretend that you have a democratic system in the United States, and it's an actually healthy, functioning democratic system, which is obviously not the case. But let's just, for the sake of argument, pretend that it is. You don't believe that democracy is important, for example, in the private sector. You don't believe that businesses, that companies, that corporations should be democratic. Your belief in the supremacy of democracy does not extend to the private sector. Corporations don't have to be democratic, do they? In fact, corporations are sacrosanct. It's sacrilegious to say that there should be any intervention in the private sector to make it actually accountable to the population, accountable to the public, accountable to the workers. And anyone who even talks about something like that, anyone who even suggests that companies and corporations should be democratic, will be persecuted. I mean, look at the struggle that organized labor had in the United States. Coal miners were literally bombed from the sky when they tried to organize and secure their rights and have some kind of democratic representation with the coal companies. When just now, when the railway workers were wanting to strike for better wages, for more humane working conditions, more rational and reasonable and fair workloads that would actually help to guarantee the safety of those trains, Joe Biden and the government prohibited them from striking. Where's the democracy? Because you don't mean the things that you say. You don't mean the values that you espouse. You don't mean it. If you meant it, then you would apply it across the board. You would apply it to everybody in all institutions and all dimensions of your society. It would be applied everywhere, but it's not. Democracy doesn't belong in the workplace. Democracy doesn't belong in the company, in the business, in the corporation. And no one's even supposed to suggest that it should. That's an inferior belief system. It's inadequate. It's inadequate for building a civilization, for building a cohesive society. Because look, the only group identity, the only sort of group identity that makes any sense at all, it's not racial, it's not ethnic, it's not nationalistic, not even based on language or shared culture or shared heritage. None of that makes any sense as a shared group identity. The only thing that makes sense is shared belief system. That's the only thing that makes sense as a group identity from which you can build cohesion and camaraderie and brotherhood and solidarity between people. Only belief system. You can have a certain skin color and have nothing whatsoever in common with other people who have that skin color. You can have the same language and certainly have nothing in common whatsoever with someone who speaks the same language. I'm German Irish. What do I have to do with all of the other people in the world who are German Irish? Just because we're German Irish, we have nothing in common. And yet I have more in common with a Muslim from Mali, with a Muslim from Indonesia, with a Muslim from Morocco, with a Muslim from China, from Chechnya. I have more in common with them immediately, instantly, effortlessly. We have the same frame of reference. We have the same moral code. We have the same belief. We admire the same people. Our heroes are the same heroes. Our role model is the same role model. I have more in common with them than I have with someone whose belief system is different from mine, but who looks like me, or who speaks my language, or who comes from my country. That doesn't create solidarity, and there's no reason why it should. Solidarity should be based on shared belief. People who share class identification, that makes some sense, but it's very narrow. It's not deep. It's not that meaningful. It's sort of ad hoc. You can have class solidarity on an ad hoc basis, meaning you can have solidarity with other people in the working class, other people who are poor, or if you're on the other end of the spectrum, other people who are rich, because you have shared material interests. Those things are not identity markers that make any sense for building group solidarity, group cohesion, group identity, and sense of brotherhood and fraternity and togetherness and unity. And, this is why in the West you have, popping up all the time, all of these various identity groups, instead of, well, we all believe in Western values. We all believe in Enlightenment values. You don't have any set of civilizational values that actually build real solidarity and cohesion among your people. Because even the beliefs that you have, even the values and the beliefs that you have are incoherent and are divisive by nature. They breed division by nature. You don't have a standard of beliefs that everyone can follow for what is moral and what is immoral, what's right, what's wrong. You don't have that. What kind of a society doesn't have an agreement on what's right and wrong? How can you have a cohesive civilization when you're not even all in agreement about what's right and what's wrong, what's good and bad? I mean, if you want to, if you don't want to put it in the religious terms of what's righteous and what's sinful, it doesn't matter. What's moral and what's immoral? There's no agreement among you people. So how can you have cohesion? How can you have real brotherhood and solidarity as a people? You have all of these various fake identity groups on superficial identity markers popping up all the time. You have, white nationalists. You have male supremacists, female supremacists, feminists, red pill, and then you have, even beyond that, you have people who identify themselves literally by the brands that they buy. I'm an Apple person. I'm an Android person. I buy Dolce & Gabbana. I like Nike better than Adidas. I support the Knicks. I support the Broncos. I support, the Dodgers, whatever it is. Because you don't have anything else to build a real sense of community among your people, among your so-called civilization. Because you're not in agreement about anything. So how can there be cohesion? And you can say, that there's cohesion in the beautiful diversity of beliefs, but okay, you can have, that's where you're confused. You can have cohesion, you can have brotherhood, you can have solidarity among a diversity of races, a diversity of ethnicities, a diversity of skin colors, a diversity of heritage, diversity of cultures, as long as there's a shared belief system, shared moral values. But you can't have a diversity of moral values. That's not going to work. That will only create tension and friction in the society. There's no way that can work. That's a civilizational failure. But this never happened in the Muslim world. Alhamdulillah, the Muslims are solid. We're all agreed. The only people that you'll ever find in the Muslim world who are confused about what's right and what's wrong are people who are influenced by the West. Doesn't that tell you something? Doesn't that tell you about your culture? Doesn't that tell you about your beliefs? Doesn't that tell you about your values? Doesn't that tell you about your civilization? That anyone who is influenced by your civilization becomes confused about morality? But any normal rank and file Muslim, from, like I said, from Morocco to China to Brunei, to Bosnia, to Turkey, to Saudi Arabia, to Lebanon, to Egypt, to Sudan, we're all in agreement about what's right and what's wrong. We're all in agreement about what's moral and what's immoral, what's righteous and what's sinful. We all agree. The rank and file, the normal average Muslim has no confusion about what's morally right and what's morally wrong. The largest single cohesive identity group in the world with a shared identity that's actually deep and profound and meaningful. That's not the case for people outside of the Muslim belief system. It's not even the case among Christians. Among Christians, there's a wide variety of beliefs among Christians. Maybe you'll find it among Jews. But even then, there's a serious question about who qualifies to even be called a Jew among Jewish people. For example, there's many Jews who are atheists, which doesn't make any sense to me. But what do they have in common with an Orthodox Jew? So even for you to believe in the supremacy of your belief system, is already irrational. Your belief system does not lend itself to solidarity. Your belief system doesn't lend itself to cohesion. It doesn't lend itself to a group identity. And that's why it's never really been enough. Your belief system cannot actually create a cohesive identity for a large group of people. Everybody in the society is looking for some way to find an identity and then to expand that into some identity group so that they can have some sense of belonging. That's a type of struggle that Muslims never experience, because we have a sense of belonging wherever we go in the world, because we can go into any Muslim community and belong. I could go from China to Latin America and find Muslim communities where I would belong, and where the people there would resonate with me and I would resonate with them, and we would understand each other, and we would be able to relate to each other, and we would feel brotherhood for each other. You can't say the same. You couldn't fill a room with random Europeans from France, from Germany, from Romania, from England, and then from America, from Australia, from Canada. You couldn't fill a room with random Westerners and have them all agree on what's morally right and what's morally wrong on any issue. And the people, and whoever agrees, whatever two people agree on something, will disagree on something else if it's a moral issue, because your basic moral belief has become that nothing is right and nothing is wrong. Well, how are you going to survive as a society? How are you going to survive as a civilization when you have a belief like that? Alhamdulillah, this is not a problem that we have in the Muslim world. We have close to 2 billion people. It will soon be 2 billion people, the overwhelming majority of which all agree on basic moral values, all agree on basic definitions of morality, and who, again, overwhelmingly agree on the purpose of life, and what kind of a lifestyle you should live, what your way of life should be, what your conduct should be in the world, what your conduct should be in society, what your obligations are, what your duties are in society. The overwhelming majority of close to 2 billion people in the world are all in agreement on that. That's cohesion. That's a basis for solidarity. That is an actual civilization. No matter what we've gone through, no matter what difficulties we face, unlike you, when times get tough for you, you throw your values out the window. When times get tough for the Muslims, they cling to their values even stronger. Their conviction in their beliefs grows. So yeah, of course, I'm an Islamic supremacist, and that's not saying anything wrong. Just as you wouldn't believe that there's anything whatsoever wrong with saying that the Enlightenment values are superior. And it's not just the conservatives, the so-called right wing, it's the left wing too, the so-called left wing, which barely exists in the West, an actual left wing. The liberals, I mean, wokeism is like the ultimate expression of liberalism. And it's the most intolerant belief system in the world. It's incredibly intolerant. It's tyrannical. Because at the end of the day, you don't mean any of it. You don't mean any of it. It's unsustainable. It cannot actually sustain a civilization, a society, or a culture, which is why it hasn't. It hasn't. You admit by your own actions that your beliefs are luxury beliefs. When everything is perfect, when everything is fine, then we'll go ahead and preserve those values. We'll preserve those beliefs. But if anything gets difficult, then for the sake of national security, we'll suspend everything. Well, if they're genuine beliefs, then you never have to suspend them. If they're things that you really believe in, if those are actually superior, then you would never have to suspend them. If they were actually superior values, then you would be able to apply them in every situation. You would never have to suspend them. They would be responsive and reliable in all scenarios. But as soon as you get into any kind of a difficult situation, you eject the values. Well, Muslims don't do that, because we don't have to. Because in fact, our value system, our belief system, our moral convictions are always applicable. They apply in any society, in any set of circumstances, in any situation, and always will.
Welcome. Now, Shahid Bolsen calls it the loose shared belief. Western society no longer agree on what is good and what is evil, okay? On sacred or profane. So every value is for sale. Every principle is negotiable. When Europe and America claimed to be the moral light of the world, they built the that claim on the contradiction. Okay, they spoke of human rights while enslaving humans. They preached freedom while colonizing continents. They talked about law while living off plunder. So the African and the Asian were told to admire the very, very system that was stealing their land. And yet, 500 years later, the foundation of the systems are shaking right now. Shahid Bolsen points to the core problem. The West replaced the creator with the corporation instead of a faith. They offered finance instead of community. They offered construct instead of a purpose. They offered pleasure. Okay? It worked for a time until people began to feel the void. Now their youth, their own youths, the white Gen Zs, they question everything. Who are we? They question their culture. They question what is the truth. Why do we feel empty in the world full of things? Okay? Their Gen Zs, their youths are questioning. And that is the same question our ancestors asked when missionaries told them to abandon their gods. That's the same question we are watching the West face its own colonial mirror. The truth is, West never had superior values. It just had superior weapons. And now that the guns are silent and the truth is speaking, we see whose values were built on sand. Bolsen is one of many Westerners seeing it. He calls for a return to belief, a return to meaning, to spiritual roots. What he does not yet see is that Africa never lost their roots. Now, let me talk about Africa for a little bit. Africa is the keeper of soul. Now, while the West was when the Western countries was racing for profit, Africa was preserving the soul of humanity. You see, our civilization from Kemet to Mali, from Libya to Benin were built on principles of balance and harmony, but not dominations. Okay? When Bolsen says Western values are inferior, he is acknowledging that a culture without spiritual center is a body without heartbeat. And Africa, despite the challenges, despite centuries of attack, Africa still beats with that heart. Okay? Our concept of Ubuntu, I am because we are, is the antidote to Western individualism. Our respect for ancestors is the remedy for their historians' amnesia or historical amnesia. Our reverence for nature is the cure to their ecological destruction. Even in poverty, our people shared food. Even under oppression, our spirit sings. Even in exile, our identity survives, and that is the power. That is power the Western cannot replicate because it cannot be bought. Shahid Bolsen critics of his own civilization is also praise of what we are becoming again. A continent rising not in revenge but in restoration. Okay? Look around the world right now. Youths in Europe study African spirituality because in America, where ancient symbols speak of energy and ancestry or ancestors, they are searching for what we never lost. The West built its identity on a single word: progress. They said we are moving forward, while the rest of the world is behind. But progress towards what? What were they progressing towards? They sent ships across the world, across oceans, claiming to discover lands already alive with people, knowledge, and kingdoms. They invented machines but forgot compassions. They built skyscrapers that scrape the sky but could not build peace that touches the heart. Shahid Bolsen calls this the mirage of progress, a glittering illusion that hides emptiness underneath. He says Western societies define advancement by how fast they move, not by how rushes they are. They confuse motion with meaning. And you see the results. The results is what is happening right now. A world spinning faster, yet understanding less. Technology connects everyone, but souls drifts apart. Children in rich nations grow up surrounded by screens and scared of love. There are too scarcity of love. They are trained to compete before they can even feel. So this is what happens when progress loses its purpose. The West once told Africa that you are underdeveloped, but who is really underdeveloped here? The one who lives in harmony with creation, or the one who destroys it for profit? Who is living with harmony, or who is underdeveloped? Bolsen honestly shakes the Western consciousness because he admits what many of them hide, that the system has no moral spine. And now, the empire that claimed to civilize the world finds itself uncivilized to its core. Now, spiritually here, when Bolsen says the West has lost shared belief, he is describing a spiritual famine. A famine not of food, but of meaning. People chase new ideologies the way the hungry chase the bread. Some looks to politics for salvation, others to pleasure, but neither can fill the soul. You see? Because without faith, without connection to something greater than itself, then the brightest culture becomes a shadow. Okay? Western civilization divorced reasons for reverences. It crowned the mind but crucified the spirit. Silence advanced but morality regressed. And so, my good friends and brothers and sisters, the coincidence of humanity to cry out. Science of humanity begins to cry out. You can feel it right now. The protest, the anxiety, the youth turning to meditation, ancestry, and indigenous wisdom. They are hearing a whisper from the old world, turn to the source. And that's what Bolsen warning really is. Not an attack on his people, but a call to conscience. He says, a society without belief will devour itself. When you look at the evidence, addiction epidemics, mental health, crisis, endless wars fought in the name of peace, So the West exported its ideologies to the globe, but now it imports spirituality from the very nation it once called primitive. Okay? African drumming is their therapy sessions. Africa drumming right now is their therapy sessions. They called this primitive one time. African herbs is their medicine right now. African rhythm is their churches. You see, poor man's food in Africa is very expensive in their countries. You have been seeing that video. So they are searching for soul. They are returning to the mother they once mocked. And Africa is patient and forgiving, still has that soul to offer because we never fully abandon our reverences. We bend, but we do not break. So when the conscience of the West begins to awaken, it looks towards the continent that still remembers how to pray and how to dance, how to live as me, as one. Kings and queens, listen carefully here. What we are witnessing is the rise of African consciousness, not as initiative or initiation of Europe, but as correction of the world imbalance. Okay? Now, for long, Africa was told her wisdom was superstition, that her community was backward, that spirituality was pagan. But right now, truth walks proudly again. You see? Across the diaspora, black youths are discovering ancestral pride. They wear symbols once banned, speak languages once silenced, question historians once forced upon them. And they are connecting to the motherland through art, through travel, through spirit, And this is not just nostalgia, it is prophecy. Because the same power that sustained our ancestors through enslavement is the same power that will guide the generation into restoration. The professor words serve as confirmation. Even the West acknowledges the vacuum. Even the empire senses that Africa carries the key. And what is the key? It is balance, not domination, but harmony. The key is not exploitation, but cooperation. Now, obvious family, every empire with a moral decay, it always falls, okay? Every empire that believes that it will last forever, but not all. Rome believed it fall. Britain believed that it fall. Now America believes to live forever, but history keeps whispering the same truth. Empires don't die from attack. They die from decay. When Shahid Bolsen says Western values are inferior, he is pointing to that decay. It isn't about building. It's not about armies. It's about morals. The moment a nation forgets right and wrong, it falls begins. Okay? And just quietly, like not beneath marble, like wrought beneath marble. Look at the signs right now. There is corruption. Corruption is normalized, greed, celebrated, violence, televised. Children grow up learning how to hustle before they learn how to love. Churches become brands, politics become theater, and the truth becomes negotiable. And this is what moral collapse looks like. And yet, within that collapse lies awakening, because people start asking, if the empire is wrong, then who was right all along? And the answer is simple. Africa was right. Black people were right. Right to honor elders, right to see land as sacred, right to believe community survival. And that's why when the moral empire crumbles, the spiritual nations rise, Now, I'll say this. Africa vision is not revenge right now. Africa vision is restoration, and we don't seek to replace our master with another. We seek balance. That's what we seek, between technology and tradition, between progress and peace. Picture it: African energy powering African cities, African media telling African stories, African spiritualities guiding global ethics. Bolsen critics opened that door. He admits that Western model can't heal the world, but someone must, okay? Who better than the continent that birthed humanity itself? Our vision must fuse ancient wisdom with modern tools. Education that teaches both coding and culture. Economies that grow without destroying the earth. Leadership that listens to the ancestors as well as the youth. We build with a purpose. Even the world that once ignored black people will turn and learn from us. The world that ignored Africa will learn from us. The future is not Western or Eastern. The future is African-centered and human-minded. Bolsen words ripple far beyond politics. They touch the hunger of the planet. Everywhere people feel the emptiness of consumed life. They have cars but no direction, jobs but no joy. So they look outwards. They look to Africa. They look to the diaspora for rhythm, for faith, for belonging. Okay? You can see it in culture. Global music wearing African drums. Global fashion borrowing our colors. Global spirituality borrowing our language of energy and ancestors. So the world is drinking from its well, or our well, again. But family, this time we must guard the sources. We can share our wisdom without surrendering our ownership. Last time we shared our wisdom and surrendered our ownership. Okay? Because what the world really seeks is not entertainment. It seeks healing. And healing has always been African ministry. So when Bolsen describes Western inferiority, he's really describing spiritual thirst. And we hold the water, and let's pour it wisely. Tell me what you think on the comment section about this video. Until next episode, peace out.